Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Antry, Associate Editor of Audioholics, and I'm here with.
Rob H. This is AV Rant, the show where we answer your questions about all things home theater and audio video. And yeah, another great week of lots of feedback, lots of questions, and lots of two-channel stuff this week. It's strange how stuff goes in themes, but we don't mind. It'll be
No, we don't mind.
two-channel week this week.
I, uh, I'm tired. I don't know why I say I'm always tired, but I was so tired this time that I fell asleep trying to go through the show notes and ended up sleeping. And now somebody's calling me on Google.
Yeah, somebody tried to call me too, so that will not be happening.
No, we will not be listening to that. So, this is a AV Rant where we answer your questions, and to get your question answered, all you need to do is email one of us, or I guess Rob at avrant.com, Tom at avrant.com. You can go to the website www.avrant.com and comment. I'm going to be talking about that in a second, and why I hate our website with a massive passion. Wasn't a happy camper this week. We are also going to, you also can go to facebook.com/avrantpodcast and talk to us there. Leave us a note. We will try to get you on the podcast that way. Google Plus is also a way to do it, though it's not very reliable. But Twitter, for Rob, it's at First Reflect, or for me, it's at avrant_Tom. Now, the website. You ever have one of those weeks where you really wonder why you even bother getting up in the morning? That was kind of my week with AV Rant.
Oh dear.
Clint asked me to make some changes to the website, to the URL structure, which, okay, seemed all right to me, I guess. It's a good idea, I suppose. And I did it, and it worked. And the next morning I woke up, and I went to the AV Rant, and it said, nope, it's 503 error. I got a 503 error, which is a server error. I was like, oh, crap, I broke the website. So I went into the backside of it. I could get it just fine. It seemed to work. So I was like, oh, Clint, I'm sorry, I broke the website. You got to help me. He goes, oh, the website's fine. I can see it fine. I was like, Rob, can you see the website?
Yeah, I could also see it fine at the time that you
Yep.
asked.
Yep. Not only that, I took my computer to a different house
Oh.
and logged into their Wi-Fi and worked just fine. I could see it there. I took the same computer back to my house, no longer worked. So there was no there was no IP bans, there's no blocks, there's no nothing. It just stopped working for about 5 days.
That would be nice. Just ban yourself.
It happens, but I didn't do it. And so I remember I put out a call for help about we were having some sort of bot issue where our bandwidth was getting exceeded. Ray offered to help me, and right at that same time was when this website went down. It just fixed itself yesterday for no real reason that I can ascertain. I just woke up and it was better. So honestly, Bright House Networks, like my cable, internet, everything crashed for about 6 hours. When it came back, AV Rant worked again. So whatever. Gremlins. I'm going with Gremlins.
Times. No kidding, man. Ghost in the Machine.
Yes. Ghost in the Machine. So this week we do have some listeners of the week to thank. We have Ahmed and Shane. Shane wrote SVS to let him know that our podcast brought them to his attention. I don't know if he bought anything, but hey, at least we brought them.
He has SBS subs, so I think that would be the case.
There you go. Yay. But if you would be a listener of the week, you can just email us and let us know how, in what way you supported the podcast, and there's many ways to do that. We have a race car. If you have a race car and would like to slap a AV Rent sticker on there, you could be our other race car. Paul is our race car driver. Paul's a race car driver. And then, yes, every time.
I didn't even have an update this week, but you still managed to fit it in. I like it.
You can. Oh, I know, right? Well, he hasn't crashed his car in a week. Means he lost.
That's right. That's right.
We've had people just call us up and say, hey, we bought a sub because of you, or we, bought this TV because of you, or, thanks for the advice, and we told our friends. That's all good. But you can also go to the website at avrant.com, click on the buy us a cup of coffee, and leave a PayPal donation. Those are always appreciated. They help support the website. And if the things like this week happen, it's going to support my drinking habit because of the website. But so far, I haven't had to dip into that as of yet. So thanks to Ahmed and Shane for supporting the podcast in your own ways, and we really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Ahmed. Thank you, Shane.
All right. Now, on to some news. First of all, Star Wars Episode 7 has a title, The Force Awakens. That is not a bad title. I like it.
I'm fine with that. Apparently, some people are already pre-hating it, but I see no reason to do so.
I think it's good. suck. I think it's going to be awful.
I don't.
But
I think it's going to be good. I have high hopes, but at least
well,
it doesn't have rises or dawn in the title. Because for a while there, every movie it seemed like the title it was like mandatory for it to have the word rise or dawn in it. So
yeah,
at least that isn't there.
it's now it's just waking up. So rising at dawn is awakening. So there
There
you
you
go.
go.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't have a lot of faith. Well, I would say I'll put it this way: if any of these new ones are going to be good, it's going to be the first one because J.J. Abrams can do usually a good first movie. It's the rest of them that kind of blow. So maybe this one will be okay, but I'd have a little faith in that. Aereo isn't totally dead, but it's barely alive. No one really
Mm.
cares because it is really dead. Toy
Poor
Story
Aereo.
4 is coming. For a company Pixar that didn't want to do sequels, they sure are doing a lot of sequels.
Yes, and some people were upset because they're like, the ending of Toy Story 3 seemed like such a great ending to the entire thing as a thing. But apparently, John Lasseter, he's the one who directed the first and second ones and wrote the stories there. He's like, we had a really great idea that he was super excited to make, so. You know what? If they're that jazzed about it and it isn't just a money grab thing, then maybe it'll be really good.
I
Because
don't
I
know.
mean,
I
hey,
thought 2 was totally a money grab because that didn't
but it was
really. I
two
didn't
was
like.
good, man. I
I didn't
like.
like 2.
Oh,
Didn't like.
all right.
All right. What I am more excited about is Ash versus the Evil Dead, which is
Uh
Bruce
huh.
Campbell and Sam Raimi are going to come back. A 10-episode TV show coming to Stars, which I can totally get behind. I'm trying to think of the things that Bruce Campbell has done that I don't like, and I can't come up with anything. So there you go. There's that.
Bruce Campbell is pretty awesome.
He
I
is.
wonder if they'll tie in the new, Evil Dead remake thingy. If they'll try and
I haven't seen the new
wink
one,
and
to
a
be honest
nod to
with
that.
you. My
Nor have I.
8-year-old son set up Halloween night and watched Evil Dead 2 with me, and he started it. He started it, and he was really scared. And one of his friends thought, "I think it's supposed to be funny." I'm like, "You get it. My son doesn't, but you get it." And my son was like, I said, "Well, do you want to stop watching?" He goes, "I think it's better if I just watch it all the way through because then it won't be scary because I'll see the end." I'm like, "You may be the smartest 8-year-old boy on the frickin' planet because that's
That's
exactly what
true.
you should do."
Yep. And definitely
Anyways,
by the end of Evil Dead 2, you were laughing more than being frightened. So.
that's right. If you watched it at not 8 years of age, I'm not saying I'm a good father. I'm just saying I'm a father. You don't need a license for these things, which is probably a crime in and of itself. Now, some comments and updates before we get to our topics. Galen's finally pulled his trigger on his replacement for his broken Onkyo TX SR805 AV receiver, the one that I think is now vapor because I don't think it's really real. This whole thing, he just kept asking us questions and never buying anything. Anyways, he now claims to have bought something, accessories for less. He kept his eye on it, and the AVR X4000, which is my receiver, which is still in the box, soon will be in my home theater. So it came back in stock, and he pounced. It was $6.99, but the shipping wasn't included at that moment. But he didn't wait; he just grabbed it, and it's $730 with the shipping. So he's very excited. He says he'll send us pictures, which I don't know. I'll have to see it like a what do you call it? Those proof of life. So they'll have to have a newspaper in his name.
Mhm.
So, anyway, Efrain, last
Photoshop
week
job.
what's that?
I said Photoshop job.
Yeah, that's right. Efrain last week mentioned the LH Labs Geek Pulse DAC plus headphone amp majigger thingy that he supported via Indiegogo and got it for the bargain basement price of whatever, and now it's going to be 50.
$800
Yeah.
for the $4,100 version now.
Anyways, he sent us some links to some YouTube videos about how, why, and what for of their design stuff. And it's like, we made sure that the little thing, like the little electron thing, little path was just as long on either side, so one of them goes like back and forth, like a little,
Hmm.
you know, back and forth, and then I want to go straight because it has a longer way to go. So the back and forth one's supposed to be just as long. I'm like, whoa, I bet that speed of light that makes a huge difference.
Well, they are talking about using a femto clock, or in fact, two femto clocks that they're trying to keep in sync. At that high of a frequency, it actually does start to come into effect. But
Whatever.
then it also raises the question: why are you using two femto clocks without any sort of processor? Because the whole point of using femto clocks is to be able to say any discrepancies between the two clocks we can now fix because they're running so fast. But apparently they're not bothering to
They're
fix it
just
at the end.
no,
They're
they're
just
just making
running them
they're
as
making the
fast as they're
electrons go
going.
back and forth, so that those yes, because that's probably more accurate than using a processor, whatever.
Well,
Anyway,
I did enjoy the video there because there were two videos that Efrain sent. We will post up the links, of course, and you can have a look at those. And you know what? I mean, I like the guy. I like the engineer. He
yeah,
seems like a nice enough guy. He's definitely into what he's doing, and it's not as though it's completely unscientific or anything. He's going by the measurements, but he's I mean, there's a lot of going by measurements that are completely inaudible.
right. I
So
think it's where
it's
you lose me. It's like, okay, we're doing
yeah,
all this stuff just in case it might
yeah,
make a difference. Like, oh, we can measure it on this, you know,
right.
thing that in no way it's just not going to make an audible difference. That being said, whatever. That company, I'm sorry, and Efren knows this. They lost me when they started selling high bandwidth USB cables. At that point, I was like,
Right.
anything you have to say is suspect. Now, I'm not like I said. I think this engineer is certainly knows what he's doing, and they're certainly making a measurable difference. Audible? I don't think so, dude. But
Right.
it is what it is, and if you want to spend 52, 51, 41, 2,
Yeah,
52,
4100.
$4,100 on
In
it, I bet
total.
Efren will probably give you a deal on his for only like $3,500. Dude.
Well, I mean, I really got a kick out of the second video, which is talking all about because I'm not sure if it's going to go with the Geek Pulse. I think there's a different one that they have that is using, of course, tubes. Tubes must be offered somewhere because this is audiophile stuff. But I liked that he showed the difference in the measurements, and of course, when he went over to the tube one, first of all, the difference in signal to noise ratio between the left and right channels was significantly more different than when he's using solid state. And he's like, this is why you got to make sure the tubes that you get, you know, because he's saying, okay, this is just a prototype, so we're using two different ones from two different manufacturers, same rating, but two different manufacturers. Like, you got to make sure you get it from the same manufacturer, same batch, you know, because otherwise you'll have these differences. And I'm like, well, there seems like a good reason to not go with tubes, but more than that, the total harmonic distortion goes way up
Yeah.
when you went to the tubes. But he's like, it's all the second harmonic, and all the other harmonics go way down. I'm like, yeah, because it's acting as a filter. So why are you worrying about a 384 kilohertz sampling rate and then filtering it all out with tubes? It's like it's that type of thing where I'm like, nothing you are saying is technically incorrect. It's just there doesn't seem to be a lot of logic behind some of it.
Nah, not so much with that. Well, I mean, there is. Yes, it's logical. It's just it doesn't make much sense. You know, it's like yes, you're right. These things are different, but
Yep.
you're not interpreting them correctly,
Right.
or at least the way that I would interpret them. All right. That being said, let's go on. We have a lot
Okay.
of stuff to talk about. I'm going to talk about tubes all day.
I know.
Somebody asked us some
I
questions about tubes.
wanted to comment.
Whatever. Michael, her suggestions last week regarding his setup where he wants to play files that are stored on his Mac using his wireless router and his LG Blu-ray player. His wireless router was powered by his ISP, and he has it placed in his entertainment stand close to his Blu-ray player so he can physically connect the Blu-ray player to the router using Ethernet. That means the problem is the wireless connection between his Mac and the wireless router, since everything used to work and smoothly with it when his Mac was it used to be hardwired to the router as well. Since he could probably use more storage anyway, it seems that the best solution now is to probably buy some NAS storage that you can physically connect to the router. That way, pulling files from the NAS to the Blu-ray, to LG Blu-ray player will be all via Ethernet. But you can get the files onto the NAS from his Mac wirelessly, which kind of makes sense.
Yeah, so he was looking at a Buffalo brand link station. You know, I tend to favor Synology just because I'm more familiar with them and I like their software more. There's absolutely no reason why this Buffalo can't be every bit as good. The only thing is that the Buffalo one that he's looking at is just one drive in a NAS enclosure, and that's it. So if he ever wants to add more storage space than that, there's no like upgrading of that particular unit. So
Yeah.
he's like, that's okay. He figures, you know, the 2 terabyte size will be fine for everything he wants to store. But it's like, I kind of like ones that you can upgrade. I like the
Seems
Synology ones
like
because you can upgrade them on the fly.
seems like he didn't tell us all that last week, right? That
No, he didn't. He didn't have the exact way that it was set up,
yeah,
so we weren't
we
sure
could
if there were
yeah.
other wireless connections involved.
These
But yeah,
also there's also maybe this is coming later. Oh, it is Scott. Yep. Scott's about to say it, so I won't say it. But go
yeah.
on.
You know, I was just gonna say. I mean, it's first of all, I think this does make sense. I think when you're in a situation like this, you know, I'm always in favor of having NAS enclosures on your network, because when you want to store a lot of stuff and then be able to access it from multiple devices, I think it's just the logical way to go. And they use less power as well, right? Like right now, if he wants to watch anything, he'd have to have his Mac fully powered up and then have his whole entertainment system also fully powered up, and that's drawing more electricity than you really need to in order to just do that. So NAS devices can use a lot less wattage while they're up and running. So there's advantages there, and certainly I think that's the way to go. But it would be interesting to figure out, just as an exercise, why he's having this problem, because he could go the simple way of just plugging in some sort of USB adapter to see if it's just the wireless card that's built into his Mac. Or I kind of suspect a lot of the routers that are provided by the ISPs, they're not exactly the greatest in the wireless area.
So the guy who's got one.
Yeah, that would not surprise me if it's actually that router that was provided by his ISP. But since we know everything worked hardwired before, no reason to think it wouldn't again.
Scott also pointed out that you could use in this sort of situation where you win a hardwired network connection, but you cannot easily use your router. The power line network adapters do exist, and you can use the existing electrical wiring in your house to give you a hardwired network connection, which is a good suggestion. I've used it, and I think it works really good for most things. I think, if I remember correctly, back in Jacksonville, and I had sort of sketchy wiring in that house, it was okay for most things. I don't think I could get 1080p. I don't even know if I had 1080p Netflix back then, but I didn't get the best. I noticed a difference in the streaming speed going a hardwire connection to my router versus the power line connection. And it was certainly an issue, and a noticeable issue, when I was doing online gaming. So the wired connection, hardwire connection, was better, but the power line connections do work. There's no doubt they work, and they might be a lot better now than they were then, because that was easily 4 years ago. So those things can change. I used those. I took those with me when I went to Australia, and they weren't totally rated for 50 hertz, 220 or whatever it is over there, and yeah, they burnt up.
Yeah, I mean, it does depend a little bit on the wiring in your house, too. And you might not always know that, because if you purchased it and never opened the walls, who knows? There might be things that would surprise you if you did.
Almost, if Homes on the Homes, or whatever it's called, any indication, it will always be things that will surprise you when you open the wall. And he will always say they're terrible, and it will always tear your house completely down, gut it, and start over again. I'm burning it to the ground. Apparently that's how Canadians roll. I'm burning it to the ground, start over again. I'm like, dude, I just have $5,000 for my budget here. You can't burn my house. Oh. If HGTV is paying for it, I guess. Shane.
Yep.
Shane has a better fix for the blue LED on SVS subs, and he has an HTPC suggestion. First of all, Shane emailed SVS about that bright blue LED that lots of people find bothersome on the subs. They responded right away, suggesting that simply disconnecting the little 3-pin connector on the inside panel of the amp. No need to clip a wire or use electrical tape. Electrical tape is a lot easier than removing this wire. But SVS actually has a manual for how to get at dislocate to unscrew the amp and disconnect the LED wire. So they actually have they've been asked this so often that rather than dim that bad boy, they have a manual for it.
It's part of their amplifier replacement instructions, but right in there it does show you where the little LED thing connects, and it's a very simple little connector that you can just pull out, and then you always have the option of reconnecting it if you ever want that blue LED back for some reason, or you're going to sell it. Someone is going to
that's why you want it back. You can sell it, or you can just take the tape off. All right.
Yeah, Shane posted a link to that instructions there.
Shared our frustrations with Windows-based HTPCs. He settled on using an Open ELEC. I don't know what that is.
That's what it is. Open ELEC. I don't know.
Yeah, anyways, which is a Linux distro of XBMC. He says it will output bitstream lossless audio just fine and runs much more like a consumer electronics appliance versus a Windows-based solution that always needs updates and fixes and all that nonsense. So that's a suggestion from Shane.
Yeah, I have no idea if I will ever have the opportunity to look into that, but certainly it makes sense. I'm almost
like, once you commit to one solution, you're totally stuck with it. It's like you get on the iPhone and you're like, transferring over to Android is going to be such a hassle.
One of the reasons I've stuck with Windows is because I am a crazy oddball situation where I've mentioned it before, like I still have HD DVDs, and that can sometimes be a problem. I still like to be able to access disc menus because I prefer to be able to see special features knowing what they are rather than just seeing a list of things with timestamps and no idea what it is I'm going to be watching. I do enjoy 3D, and that is often a difficulty when you're using direct show players and that type of thing. So because I'm such an odd case, I've reluctantly settled on the solution that I have. But yeah, if I ever have time, boy, would I love to play around with some of these things. And getting into Linux, I have no idea how I would adjust to getting into Linux, but it makes sense that it would work a little bit more stably than something with Windows running underneath.
Yeah. Anyways, okay, so Andy last week asked some questions, actually asked us and SVS, and then asked us about SVS's answers.
Mm-hmm.
He was having some trouble getting his subwoofers to play in two-channel stereo mode. He took SVS's advice and ours, and now everything is working. He reran Odyssey Multi-QXT, manually set the speakers crossovers to 80 hertz. Didn't worry that his Onkyo didn't have a small and large speaker setting, since Rob mentioned that this particular model only give options for either full band or crossover frequency, and used the regular stereo listening mode instead of pure direct, and success. It is now all good. So there you go, Andy. Yay for you.
And that is the beginning of our two-channel adventures, which will continue throughout the rest of the podcast.
It really will. Now, we have some questions from last week. Jose, and we're going to go through some of the questions from last week so you know what's coming, and then you can fast forward to which one. I mean, not that you can't, but anyways. Jose thinks we lack experience and understanding. Basically, he thinks we're idiots, and he's going to tell us why, and we're going to tell you what we think about him. Nico posted a link to an Audio Engineering Society paper regarding the audibility of high-res audio. We talked about that briefly. Gabe wants a better way to organize and access all of his music, including multi-channel recordings. John sent us a PDF that aims to create a listening room and set up standard for two-channel sound. I glanced at it.
I read through the whole thing in detail, word by word.
Oh, sure you did. Jay wants to know how projection screen gain affects contrast. Med gives some great feedback and ironic feedback, anyways. And asks about screen aspect ratios and subwoofer speaker crossovers. Ironic. Anyways, you'll see about that. Second, Matthew has a large basement, and dreams of a new 5.2 setup, and he'd like some recommendations. Boy, we've never heard that before. David has some questions about Rythmik subwoofers. Frank asked about adding subwoofers to a two-channel setup. Mike has some near-field speaker questions about speakers that we've talked about, but it wasn't Mike's, so they're just the same speakers we've talked about for like 4 straight weeks. Jared is being tempted by the Denon AVR X4000. Let's give in. Cameron asks the single most important one of us. Cameron asks the single most important Dolby Atmos question ever, and also has an acoustic panel question. Bruno needs some more help planning out his front projection installation. And William, William is the one with the review for us to tear apart. In fact, now we have a second review just came in today. That's something we might have to have a review podcast.
That is possible.
That's where it's.
William is quickly becoming the new Infinite Gary, whom we have not seen for a couple of weeks. So maybe Infinite Gary has given up on us from all the bumping.
Oh, yes, poor Gary. He has suffered the injustice of it all. All right, so where are we at here? Back up to Jose. All right, Jose. These are his exact words. In episode 407, include additional. Okay, his exact word. Episode 407 include additional predictable critique of two-channel setups. I wish you could take. This is his words. I wish you could take a walk in my shoes. Home theater and two-channel are two separate worlds, and good two-channel stereo imaging and resolution is something to respect and not easily attainable with a cheaper home theater system. And to simply dismiss the benefits of higher quality caps and other components as irrelevant is to me a comment born out of a lack of experience. 40 years doing this tells me different. Love my home theater system for movies, but can never approach the sound of my stereo-only system.
Who's going first, Tom?
I'll let you. You're nice. You go first.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I want to say I debated whether to include this because if someone is really set in their opinion, and it sounds as though Jose is, I'm inferring that, but it sounds as though he's quite set in his opinion, then I am not sure how much give and take, how much discussion there is to be had. If he's just saying, I wish you could hear what I hear, and apparently you don't, and therefore you're wrong, then it's like, well, I don't know how much movement there's going to be with Jose. However, one of the things that we aimed to do when we turned AV Rant into an entirely Q&A question show was that unlike things that get dismissed or glanced over or ignored on other shows, it's like, nope, if you write to us, ask us a question, send us feedback, we will address it. And, whether that's repetition or whether that's stuff that we don't know anything about, we'll still address it. That's going to be sort of the way we come at the show. So that's why ultimately I decided, yeah, we'll put this in there and we can talk about it. And,
so it's in there. Respond.
Yes. So, I struggled with this. I was trying to think, exactly what I want to say in response to this, but I will say, first of all, yes, of course, I have not had 40 years of experience because I am 33 years old, so therefore I have definitely not had as long a listening experience. However, I have listened to quite a lot of things. What's interesting to me is that coming at this with the idea that two-channel and home theater are two separate worlds, I wonder how familiar Jose is with where two-channel came from in the first place. We posted a PDF that came from Floyd Toole, a number of years ago, and he did a wonderful, great, succinct description of the fact that we started with mono, and that makes sense. You started with one channel and then tried to move to more channels, and two-channel ended up being the compromise, not because it was the goal. Ultimately, they decided you needed at least 3 channels to really get an experience where an audience could share the experience. Not just one listener, but an audience could share the experience. You needed 3 channels, but they settled on 2 because vinyl could not contain 3 channels, 3 separate, distinct channels. We ended up going to quadraphonic by sort of matrixing in rear channels into the existing 2 channels, but we still didn't end up with the center channel, the one that allows voices that are supposed to be centered between the 2 speakers to remain there positioned. He's talking about imaging as being something that is difficult and something that needs to be respected. And it's like, well, we thought about that a long time ago, and the solution was to have a speaker in the middle so that regardless of where you were sitting in the room, that's where the sound would come from. We recognized that as being a problem, but there were limitations in the recording and the playback technology at the time, and we ended up with 2-channel. So what's interesting to me is that it's very, very easy, and I mean, tons of people share Jose's opinion, and if all he wants is to hear someone, say back what he already believes, then I guess this isn't going to be the right podcast for him. But I'm hoping that one of the reasons he's listening is because we would like to have a discussion and we'd like to look at ideas that are already in place and say, is that actually the best way to come at this? I mean, later on, we've got something coming out. John sent us that paper where they were trying to come up with standards for 2-channel, and I find it interesting and a little bit funny because it's a little bit like a poet who says, all right, I'm going to write a sonnet, and that is the constraints that I'm giving myself, and that can lead to wonderful creativity. But if all you wanted to do was convey a particular idea, would you set that constraint upon yourself? Is that the most efficient way or the best way to come at conveying an idea? So if what we want is accurate sound reproduction, is 2-channel, just because we've had it for a long time, does that mean we must continue to constrain ourselves within it? That's a question that I have, and to me the answer is no. It doesn't make sense that if we have better ways of doing things now that didn't necessarily exist when 2-channel was first born, does that mean we must continue to do things in these, sort of ways that some people have sort of set in stone in their mind? So, that's my first response. I'll think of more things as you go along.
Yeah, it comes down to, for me, there's a couple of things. What I'm hearing, and like you said, we can only read into this so much. First of all, anything that we say that doesn't exactly line up is taken as a threat. This is a common thread on the internet. It's become this way. It just seems like we see it over and over again. If you do not 100% agree with me or say something that I 100% agree with, you are attacking me. I'm not attacking you. I don't really care. I don't really care what you think about 2-channel or what you think about home theater. I mean, you asked me my opinion. I didn't ask you yours. So somebody asked me about 2-channel. I gave them my response. Now, you can take or leave that. And if you don't agree with it, you're welcome to not agree with it. And you're welcome to tell me that, just like this, like Jose. You're welcome to tell me that you don't agree with it. And I'm welcome to say, I still don't agree with you, Jose. Now, the problem here, at least in my mind, is I'm reading through the line, through the things there, is like the higher quality caps and other components as irrelevant. There's at no point do we say that they're irrelevant.
That's right.
At no point did we say that higher quality components is not capable of creating better sound than lower, at least than lower quality ones. But at some point, you're looking at measurable differences that aren't audible, just like we were talking about with that DAC a few seconds ago. There's at some point you stop. Now, that being said, I have said over and over again on this podcast that the most amazing listening experience I ever had was with a two-channel electrostatic setup.
Mm-hmm.
That is the single most amazing listening experience I've ever had. I was the only one that could have it at any given time, because the minute I moved my head, I couldn't have it anymore. I mean, my head could be in one spot, and that was it. And that doesn't make it any less amazing. That being said, it's not something I can share with somebody. It's like trying to share a headphone experience with somebody. You can't. Mm-hmm. You have it, and you pass it to them, and they have it, and then you're like, was that cool? Like, yeah, what part did you think was cool? Let's listen again. Let me see him again. Okay, this part right here, I'm going to rewind it. You know what I mean? It's not the same. Now, that being said, a lot of people, what we hear, well, at least I hear, is, oh, my two-channel setup is so much better than my home theater setup.
At which point, my response is, then there's something not right about your home theater setup.
Exactly. Why is your home theater setup so bad? That's your real question you should be asking yourself. Why did you spend so much more money on your two-channel gear, or more to the point, and I think this happens, you put all your good gear, your high-quality gear, in or your favorite gear, your favorite songs, or your favorite tracks in your two-channel setup, and then you never listen to them in your home theater. Why is your home theater gear so substandard, or why are you only keeping the best thing? I mean, I just read a tweet from, who's the guy that was working for Emotiva that now has his own website that left?
Andrew Robinson.
Yeah, I just saw a tweet from him yesterday that I almost threw my computer across it. Oh, he was listening to something. I wish I could hear this on vinyl. Because the medium is what makes the difference, right? It's the medium. It's not why is whatever gear you're listening to so bad that it somehow you're limiting yourself? Because that's a good home theater gear. Gene's was at 50. I can't remember, $30,000 speakers, whatever they are, $50,000 speakers, are a two-channel speakers as part of a home theater setup. Mm-hmm. He wants to listen to two channels. He only turns two of them on. He wants home theater. He turns all of them on. You're not going to tell me that his home theater is in some way substandard because it happens to be next to other speakers. That's just not the case.
Yeah, the idea that it could never approach the sound of a dedicated stereo-only system, right? That I have a real beef with that statement. The idea that a home theater could never approach the sound of a stereo-only system. It's like, then there's something wrong with every home theater that you've ever been in.
If Jose, and I'll say this, I mean, if what you're saying is true, if we lack experience and understanding, and that if that home theater could never approach two-channel, then any two-channel speaker in any situation, any two-channel setup, going up against any other home theater setup, the two-channel should always win.
I don't think that's quite what he was saying.
But it's
I think it's like the best two-channel system will always be superior to the best home theater. I think that's more.
Well, yeah, I mean, take your two channels and put them in as part of my 5.2. So, how is that in any way?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things and again, I'm inferring here, I'm reading between the lines, but I have a suspicion that Jose maybe sort of checked out. He heard us making some critiques, things that he's probably heard before, because he uses the word predictable, right? Predictable critique of two-channel setups. And I think what's happened is he's probably had experiences online, gone to forums, or had discussions in real life, whatever it is, and, come across the surround sound only versus the two-channel only guys, or, had the head-to-head clashes that are so frequently seen, and people get thrown into one camp or the other. And I think he maybe checked out, because when he's saying things like, dismissing the benefits of higher quality components and, calling them irrelevant, is like we never said that. So that means he is assuming we hold those opinions because we said something that other people who maybe did say those things, so it's like, taking us and lumping us in with the whole group of people, and that isn't fair. That would be equally unfair for us to say, because Jose never mentioned anything about thinking that super expensive cables or super expensive power cords are part of the equation. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. He never said
cable elevators. I think Jose leave uses cable over
Yeah, I
here.
mean, if we said that, that would be just as unfair because he never wrote that as far as we know. But we could go ahead and infer, oh well, a lot of these two channel is superior to surround sound guys. They think that super expensive cables make all the difference, and that's nonsense. But Jose never said that. So we're trying to say, please actually listen to what we're saying because we fall somewhere in the middle. What Tom and I care about is real differences that are actually audible, that aren't a figment of anyone's imagination, that aren't something that maybe it can be measured, but there's no way in heck you're ever going to hear it, or maybe it's something that can't be measured because it doesn't actually exist, and things like that. Like, we care about what's real and actually getting value for your money because we're not the guys saying never spend more than $100 on any component. Like, we're not those guys. There are some people who go into that camp too, and a lot of people would call us crazy for saying that it's worth it to go from a $500 subwoofer to a $2,000 subwoofer, or from $500 per pair speakers to $3,000 per pair speakers. There are a ton of people who would say, I don't hear that difference, or if there is a difference, it's so small, it's totally not worth that increase in cost. And you know what? They have a point. That opinion, I can't disagree with that at all. But I do have enough listening experience to say, you know what? I've heard enough speakers where it makes a difference, and it's a small one, it's a subtle one, but it's enough of a difference to me that if someone is really into it, I would recommend that it's worth it. What isn't worth it is then going from that, especially in like an AV receiver. Last week I recommended a $2,000 AV receiver to use as a preamp in a 2-channel setup. To me, that's not an inexpensive choice. I'm saying that is worth it because measurement-wise, it's a fantastic preamp. And it's $2,000. What isn't worth it is going from that to something that costs like $30,000 and doesn't have better quality components. A lot of times it's just the price. It's an empty box with lower quality components and an astronomically higher price tag. That is not worth it. So if it's going to be one of these arguments that the price must be justified because how could they exist? How could people keep paying it unless it sounded better? That's where I go, psychology. That's how that can happen.
And on what Rob is saying is absolutely true, but on the other side of that is if you hear a difference and it makes you happy, I am never going to tell you that you're stupid. Okay? I'm not going to even believe it.
Or you just liked the looks.
It doesn't make any difference. But if somebody else asks me, should I buy the same thing he bought?
Yeah.
Because he seems to really like it. I'm going to tell them no. Because they don't have the same amount of whatever the crazy is that you've got that allows you to spend $30,000 and hear a difference that doesn't exist. Now, that being said, as long as you are enjoying it, I'm perfectly happy for you to enjoy it. But if someone's going to ask me my opinion, all I can tell them is what I believe. And what I believe is there's a certain... there are things that I believe are different than other things. Those are measurable things that are different than other things, measurable and audible. And I mean, I've said it on the podcast before. I believe in DACs. I think DACs are a thing that helps things in certain situations. But I'm not going to believe that a DAC that you have to spend $4,200 on a headphone DAC because it's got longer little trails on the inside. I'm not doing that. I just don't think it's a mature. I think that technology is mature enough. But if Efrain enjoys his DAC and thinks he got $800 worth out of it, good for him. I mean, and I think he probably did he certainly got $800 worth of engineering out of it. I mean, the amount of technology and time and energy that went into it certainly is worth that price point. Whether or not it gives him $800 more audible difference in his he's the one he's going to tell us because he has more than one DAC that he can test things with. So we're going to be hearing from him as he gets a chance to listen to these things. But it's just, don't read into what we're saying, and we won't read into what you're saying, and just know that all we're trying to do is give the best advice we can. And if that advice is buy a $2,000 receiver and use it as a preamp, that's what we'll say. And if it's buy a $500 receiver because that's all you need in your situation with your speakers, that's what we're going to say too. There we go.
I think we'd handled that all right.
Yeah. And you're wrong, Jose. We don't lack experience and understanding. You do. We're rubber and you're glue.
There it goes.
Suck it. Anyways, okay. So Real mature, Tom.
Yep.
I'm
Well
taking
done.
my AV receiver and going home. Okay. Anyways, Nico posted a link to an AES Audio Engineering Society paper regarding the audibility of high-res audio. Now it's going to cost you $20 to get the paper. Okay, it's $20 to get the full paper, but if you just read the abstract, it basically tells you what the results are, which is that in actual double-blind tests, no one could reliably identify high-res versus CD quality. So, you want to read the whole thing? We'll give you the link, and you can dissect it for us. Did you actually you didn't pay for this? Did you?
I did not pay for it. Nope. I just went by the abstract. And, I'm just regurgitating what's already said in the abstract so you can see it for yourself. But this was a setup where they had the output coming out at whatever the original resolution of the recording was. And then if they wanted to convert it down to CD quality, they were doing so in real time through a device that's within the signal chain. So, of course, there will be plenty of people who are saying, well, that's the reason why or whatever it is. I mean, they'll say it was something to do with the connections or the real-time conversion was the problem or whatever it is, right? I mean, there will always be the people who just steadfastly hold to the belief that it must make a difference because the number is bigger. So how could it not? But yeah, anyway, if you want to see all the details, it's in the paper. You can see all the equipment they use. They went with like crazy high expensive cables because some of the audiophile people who were participating in it said, well, those things make a difference. They said, all right, you say it makes a difference, we'll make it part of the playback system. And nobody could statistically tell the difference.
I like that they used high-end gear. They're like, whatever, dude, this is a bunch of crap to us, but hey, if it makes you happy, let's do that.
This is the thing, real double-blind testing,
Yeah.
which I put so much faith into that. And you know what? I would probably be proven to be a nutcase and a bit of a liar because there will be plenty of situations, I have no doubts, plenty of situations where they could take a $200 subwoofer and a $2,000 subwoofer and in a double blind test, depending on what, I mean, I probably would be able to tell them apart. I'm probably claiming to hear things that I don't actually hear. I'm willing to admit that.
Yeah.
But a lot of times I'm very confident that the claims I make I can actually back up. So, yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of high-res music, Gabe, one of our longtime listeners and frequently visits our hangouts at the end of our podcast. We record 9 p.m. on Eastern time. Gabe often shows up and tells us how high-res recordings make a difference to him, and that I'm fine with that. Good for you, Gabe. And I think that for no other reason, now you have high-res recordings that people spent more time worrying about how they're going to sound because it was for a high-res file instead of a normal one. Gabe is on a quest to digitize and organize all of his music, but most of his software, the software he's finding, really only works for two-channel audio content. Gabe is a fan of multi-channel music as well. Do we have any suggestions for software that will handle metadata, artwork, organization, and playback, and work for multi-channel recordings too? You know I don't, so Rob.
So first of all, I want to say this is a great one that we are going to put out to the AV Rant community because hopefully some folks out there will know more than I do and more than Tom does on this particular subject.
Can't know less than I do, that's for sure.
But Gabe and I had a little bit of back and forth. I'm sorry, he did mention some of the ones he's already tried, so I'm certain some of those will probably come up as suggestions again. But the one that he knows about but hasn't actually played around with yet is JRiver, and certainly as playback software, JRiver comes highly recommended and can handle multi-channel audio because it can just digitally put out whatever it's playing without touching it. So whatever it is that goes out, and then your receiver, because in Gabe's case he'll be using a surround sound processor of some sort since he's listening to surround sound music, it handles all the decoding and playback as normal. The computer is just putting out what you gave it. So JRiver will certainly do that. The tricky side is finding all the metadata and the artwork and making sure it's nice organizationally, and JRiver is certainly nice organizationally in terms of being able to search for what you want and organize it how you want. Now, we talked about this in our Hangout last week with some folks who are more familiar with JRiver. It can interface with GraceNote, and Gabe himself was mentioning he's looked into GraceNote as a metadata and an artwork provider, and more than the other ones he's seen, they have stuff already loaded up for multi-channel recording. So he's like, it would be great if I could use Grace Note to get my metadata and my artwork, and then use great playback software. So since we know for sure JRiver can work with Grace Note, and Grace Note already looks like a good solution for that, I think that combination sounds very promising. However, I don't have first-hand experience with it, so I don't know for sure. So if you are listening to this and you know something even better, or you can just confirm that that's a good way to come at this, we'd love to hear your feedback. Email us, avrant, Rob at avrant, Tom at avrant.com, or come to Facebook. That's probably the better place, facebook.com/avrantpodcast, and please let us know.
There you go. Yep. Yeah. John over on Twitter sent us a PDF that aims to create a listening room and setup standard for two-channel audio. It's from the HD Acoustics and Acoustic Frontiers.
Mm-hmm.
Is that an organization?
Well, those are two sites anyway.
Oh, yeah. Okay. HD Acoustics and Acoustic Frontiers goes into detail regarding various measurements, room design, acoustic treatments, speaker placement, in an effort to create a standard for two-channel music listening. It seemed like it was near field. It sounded like it was more. Was it near field?
No, because I made mention of how in the recording studios or the mixing stations that those are often near field, and then the difference of bringing that to a regular size listening room with a far field speaker setup. So it is about a listening room setup, not a studio mixing station.
30 pages long.
Yeah, well, some of that is pictures.
Yeah, I'm looking at some pictures. Lots of stuff.
Yeah, so I wanted to touch on something that they say right on the second page, because I think it's very germane to what we've just been discussing. So this is taken directly from this. This is a quote. In a home theater, the priorities are different. Whilst maintaining spectral balance is an equal priority in both situations, so they're talking about both home theater and two channels. So while maintaining spectral balance is equal priority in both situations, digital room correction is often used in a theater. Acoustical design then focuses on minimizing seat-to-seat variability in frequency response through careful study of the number and location of multiple subwoofers. This practice allows subsequent application of equalization. So all that tells me, and they go into this later, first of all, in this two-channel standard that they're trying to implement, they aren't using subwoofers. They're advocating for full-range speakers only, and they are not using any sort of digital room correction. They're advocating for using passive room treatments and speakers and perhaps a little bit of tone balance only, but no, Odyssey or Dirac or something like that. So right away, this brings me back to the point I was saying with Jose. Why, when we have these things, why are we focusing on saying a two-channel setup? Because they say this in the paper that they're suggesting, that a two-channel setup is two speakers and one listening position. That's what they're trying to optimize. Two speakers and one listening position only. Meaning, if you have a friend or a significant other, nope, they can't share the experience. It's just you. Why? Why can't we have a system that works for an audience of more than one person? Why can't we use subwoofers? Why can't we use digital room correction? Why are these things that we must not introduce into the two-channel listening experience? That doesn't make sense to me. I mean, as an exercise in trying to come up with creative solutions to a problem that you created for yourself, okay, that's fun, but why? Why do it that way? It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it really does. You can see the logic behind it, and the logic is the people who are two-channel fanatics, they don't want to use any of that stuff because they think it makes it sound worse. It just doesn't. During the entire recording process, where are you finding these recordings that are literally from the mic, etched directly onto the record? You know what I mean? It just doesn't happen. I've actually heard stuff like that before. There's a guy that
when they have no compressors or anything at all, it sounds awful.
It's just and you can hear all this screeching and background noise and all sorts of weird stuff. There's all sorts of processing that's going on when they're mixing it and recording it and everything else. But yet, if you add so much as a little bit of tonal control, if you do a little bit of frequency response adjustments based on not what is going on in the recording, not what's going on with what your room is doing to the sound before it hits your ear. If you adjust for that, you are somehow destroying the sound.
Yeah. Yeah,
destroying it.
that's a notion, not a reality.
Oh yeah, exactly. It's the same thing
That's
when we
I
get
came
people
up
like
with this idea, so I'm going to adhere to it come hell or high water, right?
you take the emotion out of pictures when you use digital instead of film.
Right.
Uh, what? Yeah, I don't. First of all, I'm pretty sure that picture doesn't have a lot of emotion going on to begin with. But I'm certain that if you took that exact same emotion-filled,
Hmm.
photo with a digital camera, I would feel, the only way that you would not feel the same thing about it is if I actually told you it was taken with a digital camera.
Right.
That's all psychological,
Exactly.
and that's exactly what's going on here. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
You want to do it with that way? Great. You know what I
Right.
think? You know what I think is great about this? When you get that two-channel set up and you've done all the stupid stuff they tell you to do, which is all really good stuff,
Actually, yeah. All the stuff they're telling you to do to your room and all the
it's
measurements they're talking
fantastic.
about is all. I agree with all of that stuff,
Every
actually.
bit of it.
All that's
We should
good.
all do all that. And
Yep.
then we should add two subwoofers and the Odyssey, okay?
That's
And then,
right.
then everything will sound fantastic. And that's just
Yeah.
it. I'm like, why would you want to give up good, even bass in your room? Why would you do that? Why would you not want to have bass that shakes you when it needs to? And yeah, it's not going to happen that often with just two channel, but maybe it will. Maybe you'll get some
It
organ music.
certainly could. Yep.
Maybe you'll get some John Williams scores.
Hmm.
God, can you imagine how that would feel if you could actually feel it and you weren't just running them with monitors, or floor standing speakers that reach down to a bone crushing 38 hertz? You know, God, how would that feel if you could actually reach all the way down to 19? I
Yeah.
just it's
But
just
yeah, all the stuff they're talking about in terms of getting even decay times, getting
oh
a
yeah.
fast impulse decay time, like saying, hey, look, whatever reflections reach the measurement microphone, we want them to be 10 decibels quieter than the direct sound within 40 milliseconds. I'm like, that's a good goal. That takes care of the precedence effect, which they talk about, making sure that there's this even decay time throughout the room, throughout all the frequencies. I'm like, that everybody seems to agree upon that. Chris from Odyssey agrees upon that. We all agree upon that. So all of these things are good. Why then does it somehow separate itself from home theater where it we have all the same goals? Why is uniformity across the room and not just one listening position a bad thing? That part of the reasoning doesn't make any sense to me. But it's really just the bass. The bass is the only place where it's uneven from seat to seat. The rest of it, the treble and the mid range, all the stuff they're recommending is great. Now I did have to laugh because they're talking about creating a standard, a listening room standard, because they talk about dimensions of the room and the size of the room and that as well, construction of the room even.
Yeah, wasn't like the largest like 475 square feet or something like that?
Well, 4750 cubic feet, I think, was the largest that they
Oh, was it
agreed
cubic?
to.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a number I saw. But also a placement setup standard for speakers and that. And then all as they're getting to all that stuff about the room design and the room size and dimensions and where the speakers go within the room, all of the stuff they're saying is it depends, it depends, it depends, it depends, it depends. And I'm like, well, that's not really a standard anymore,
No,
is
no.
it? You've kind of moved away from the whole idea of creating it, because the idea to me is if this is a standard, well, then you have tangible goals that you can either meet or not meet. And if you're saying, well, it depends, it depends, it depends, it depends, then you're back to trial and error. I mean, you're essentially back to the same thing that's always been
You
done.
see, that's
So,
what I love about the
yeah.
dual subwoofers is that people are like, oh well, why you want? Well, first of all, I like dual subwoofers because they sound better in your room. That's easy, right? But really, what it
Mhm.
comes down to is, and this is selfish on my part, it's very easy for me to tell you where to put them, right?
Mhm.
There's no depends anymore. Okay, can you put them can you put them in opposing midpoints of opposing walls? No. Can you put them in opposing corners? No. Well, all right. Now we got to me, but I've already had two or three different possibilities of places that you can put them where I don't even have to think about it, and you don't have to
Mhm.
think about it. There's no crawling involved. It's that's a standard. That's what we have within what we're trying to achieve within
Yeah.
home here. And let's not just throw that all out the window because we don't like room correction. Uh,
But the real important thing here is that on the recording side, on the mixing side, the mastering side for music, there are no standards.
yeah,
This is the biggest problem. Trying to come up with a standard for the listening room is a fool's errand because I mean, they even go into this in the paper themselves. They're saying it depends on what music you're going to listen to. If you're listening to this type of music, maybe you'll want to have longer decay times because you want a greater sense of more ambience and reverberation in your room. Not excessive, but a little bit more than a drier room that might better suit this type of recording. I'm like, well, if that's what you're saying, then what you're saying is there is no standard, which is the truth. There is no standard right now, and there are people working. I mean, right now, SEMTI is certainly working, AES is certainly working on trying to come up with better standards, particularly for movie theaters and that, because right now the standards there don't really exist either. But it is too much of a challenge. It's not something I think we're ever going to be able to do, because the only thing you could end up with is one room size with one speakers and one seating setup.
Yeah.
So that's just never going to happen.
It's not, especially considering everybody's furniture is going to be different and that sort of thing. So it's really not going to be any real standard. But fine. Follow the guidelines and then get 2 subwoofers and a room correction system.
Yep.
So that's what I would do. So Jay is on the hunt for a front projection setup. He's planning a 120-inch diagonal 16:9 screen, but he hasn't settled on any exact models for a projector or the screen. Any exact models for a projector or the screen. So he's looking for both the projector and screen. He basically wants to try to get as close as possible to performance of his Pioneer Kuro. Good luck with that. Plasma. if we could get that close, you gotta be. How much money does he have? Does he have lots of money? Because that's
not piles. No.
Yeah, he would need piles. The Kuro Plasma. He has some interest in viewing 3D, and he despises any sort of motion blur. Yeah, so basically, I don't know. Anyways, so he first wanted to confirm whether he should have favor a DLP projector. He has spotted rainbows in the past, and a 3-chip model would be too expensive. Yeah. You got yourself a couple problems here, Jay. Problems is you don't got a whole big pile of cash to spend on this thing. Yeah, the reason why the Kuros were so great was because, first of all, they were plasmas, and then their black levels were so amazing.
Yes, and that's the part he doesn't want to give up, which I don't blame you for not wanting to give that up.
I don't blame you either, dude. But I mean, in order to get there, you're going to have to. Now, the motion blur, yeah, the LCDs you're probably going to want to stay away from LCDs. The DLPs are probably the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
At least in this inexpensive one, the Lycos or whatever they're calling them now, the new laser ones. Are going to be too. It sounds like they're going to be too expensive for him. So yeah, you're going to have to go DLP. But if you spotted rainbows, you're just going to have to be really careful with the models that you look at and look at the reviews and see. I am not susceptible to rainbows. I haven't really seen them myself.
Nor am I, yeah.
So I wish I could be more help on exact models that aren't rainbow prone. Clint probably could, but I'm not.
Yeah, once you get up to these 6x speed color wheels and that, it's awfully rare that people are seeing rainbows once you get up to that speed of a color wheel. So, yeah, I mean, this is a challenge because, I mean, the honest answer here is for a reasonable price, and I'm going to assume something in the $2,500 to $3,000-ish range is maybe within reason. You're not going to be able to get a gigantic Kuro Plasma black levels with fantastic looking 3D on a 120-inch screen with zero motion blur. Like, you're going to have to pick and choose a little bit here. And the other thing I wanted to mention is a ton of this is going to depend on your room, because if this isn't a super dedicated room that you're painting in matte black or covering in velvet, like, you're never going to hit those Kuro black levels. You just need to sort of let that go, because if your room has any reflectivity of light whatsoever, you're not going to hit Kuro black levels. I mean,
it's really hard to get the black levels that black with a front projection system.
That doesn't mean it can't look fantastic. I mean, that it's not going to be a matter of you have your Kuro on next to your 120-inch projection display, and you're going to be saying, ooh, look, the blacks are blacker on the Kuro. That's not the situation. What you're really worried about is contrast, right? You're worried, is the image, is it going to look like really deep black levels with a really punchy looking contrast?
And that's going to depend. Yeah, the projector and the screen and all that's going to make a difference, but it's going to depend on how much light control you have and what color your room is and all this other stuff. Come at us, like, if you're planning this thing, if it's going to be in the basement, you're going to have full light control, and you're going to paint everything, black or dark purple or something like that, gray, real dark gray, except for that, that's going to give you a lot more control. You're going to be able to tone down the brightness of your projector so that your blacks are deeper, and at the same time, you're going to those colors are going to pop a lot more depending on what screen you go with.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, but given that, like, say the BenQ
Yep.
W7500
Yep.
is out there in this price range, the $2,000 to $2,500 price range, it doesn't have black levels as deep as, say, a JVC DILA projector. It doesn't have black levels. I mean, actually, its black levels are pretty close to like the Sony VPL HW40, which is a fantastic SXRD. That's their version of LCOS. I mean, that's a fantastic projector that is sort of my go-to. Like anyone who's looking in the $2,500 price range, I'm usually like, do you need a motorized zoom? No? Okay, get the Sony. Like that's that's sort of because I mean it does 3D. It does gaming really really well because the Sony has very low input lag, so it's great for gaming too. It's really bright, so 3D looks good because it's bright. That's something you really want. But I mean, if motion blur is like your number one thing that you hate,
It
then
doesn't seem like, yeah, you're really going to be able to.
yeah,
A lot of these projectors. I can't remember the last time I had somebody complain about
yeah,
motion blur on the DLP or rainbows for
yeah,
that effect.
yeah.
For that matter. I mean, once you get into like this 2,000 plus
Hmm.
range, that motion blur is not gonna be your issue, dude.
Yeah. So I'd say motion blur 3D brightness. I personally kind of lean towards the DLP because I mean that BenQ is really nice.
Yeah.
So you'll have to sacrifice a little bit on your black levels, but I think that's the choice to make here.
All right, number two and the final one. How does the gain of the screen affect the contrast of the image? With a low grain screen, lower the black level, and would that, by extension, increase the contrast? You go. You want to go with this one first?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, should first mention gain. A gain is gain starts at 1.0, and what they're basing that off of is a standardized white magnesium oxide board. I mean, they have this standardized magnesium oxide board, and that is, by its own definition, a 1.0 gain. So that's where things are starting. And then every screen is compared to that standardized magnesium oxide board, and if it reflects more light back along the primary axis, so you have the projector right in front of it, right in the middle, you shoot it out, and if more light gets reflected right back into the projector's lens off of the screen versus that magnesium oxide board, then it has a positive gain or a higher than 1 gain. So it might be 1.1. It reflects a tiny bit more light back than the magnesium oxide board, or it might be 0.9. It's a tiny bit less. But that's what gain is referring to. It's just how much light gets reflected back. Now, as you go higher and higher in gain, what tends to be happening is that it's sort of focusing the reflection back in. So less light is getting scattered out to the sides, and more light is being reflected back to the source of the light. Once you get into really high gains, that's sort of what's going
Yeah.
on there. Yeah.
Generally, my rule of thumb is 1.2.
Right.
A 1.2 screen is, a lot of the calibrators will have told me that that's what they calibrate. They like to calibrate on. They like the 1.2 seems to give them the best image, best. And if you get more than that, you start seeing like sparkles and things in the
Or
in,
hot
in
spotting, where some of the screen is a little bit brighter than others.
yeah,
Other parts
so
of the
it's
screen.
almost like that. You've seen that before, maybe in those rear projection,
Hmm.
those old school rear projection screens where you're like, I've seen it like a big one where you're standing real close to it, and the middle of the screen looks bright, and it kind of like dims out, and then you move
Hmm.
around, and that spot sort of moves around with you, and you've probably seen that if you've looked off axis at like an LCD,
Hmm.
on a if they've had one of those. Especially if they had one of those little polarized screens they put in front of their
Oh yeah.
laptop screen. You go up to the side and it starts to dim out on you. So 1.2 seems to be right about. I don't think I'd go higher than 1.3. I think 1.3 would be like the maximum I'd go. I think my screen's a 1.2, and
Hmm.
that seems to be sort of the standard by which everybody
Yeah.
kind of uses.
But I mean, because he's worried about black levels, so he's obviously thought this through. He's like, okay,
Yeah.
I probably want to go with the DLP. I know the DLP doesn't have as deep black levels as, say, a JVC. So how can I get down to those super deep black levels if going to a 0.8 or a 0.9, a lower than 1 gain screen, will that do it? Well, in the technical sense, yes, it's reflecting less light, so your black levels did go down a little bit, but so did the white levels. So the problem here is that your contrast overall, and the contrast is really what matters because most of the time we're not looking at a pure black screen. That's kind of a rare event when we're watching things. Usually there's some light on the screen. And if the bright parts of the image are bright enough that it biases our eye, so even though the black light might not be truly, truly black, our eye just can't see it because the bright is bright enough to bias our eye just a little bit. That contrast matters more than just the sheer blackness of the black level. So usually what you'll find in screens that are less than 1.0 gain is that they're also a tinged, a grayish or even a blackish color. The screen itself, it becomes like a gray screen. And so, of course, the claim there is that, well, that is going to lower your black level. I know lots of people like them. I am still not the biggest fan of going with gray tinged screens. They do throw off the color balance a little bit. Yes, you can hopefully calibrate away from that, but it just never looks quite right to me. So I would favor just sticking with a white screen and making sure that it's bright enough so that the contrast overcomes any black level not being pure black.
And if you're really worried about it, get a 1.0. You know,
Yep.
get a 1.0, then you know that you're not, just a nice white screen, 1.0. You might have to jack up the brightness a little bit on your projector more than you would have like a 1.2. But you're training that off with a little deeper dark, black levels, and you're no longer worried about the color getting knocked off.
Yeah, because I mean there are like the gray screens that actually have a higher than one gain. You know, like the Stuart
Yeah.
Firehawk is like that, right? It's a gray screen, but then it's got a 1.18 or 1.2 or something like that gain. So that's all done with a coating. You know, they started with a gray sublayer, but then they put a more reflective coating on top of it so that it shines back more light. So I mean that tries to give you the benefit of, okay, the gray substrate of the screen is going to lower the black level, but then the higher reflectivity is going to give you brighter whites. But again, it always tinges the color a little bit in my experience. So yeah, it's not something I'd really worry about. The projectors right now are so good that the black level isn't going to be. I mean, it's not going to be your Kuro, but
Yeah.
yeah.
At that price point, if you're really looking at a
Mhm.
2,000 to $3,000 price point, at that price point, it's all going to be decent. It's not going to be Kuro, but then again, it's also not a plasma. So, what do you want to do? All right, Ahmed. Started by complimenting us on our dedication, though. For him, he finds it's a bit tough to find 2 hours every week just to listen. Hey, I find it tough to find 2 hours every week to do this thing and then edit it and then do the after party and then everything else. So, I'm sorry, Ahmed. First world problems. Anyways, first of all, he likes my rants, yay, when I do them. Rob geeking out, the deep dive topics, and guests and interviews, which we've been doing a little bit more of, and hopefully we'll get some more. What he dislikes, that's so much of the podcast about subwoofers and SVS. You ask the questions, dude. I can't help with that. You keep asking me about subwoofers, and I'll keep recommending SVS. We will be talking about Rythmik in a little bit. So there you go.
I mean, we've mentioned ourselves. It's not like we always want to just mention SVS. And the fact is, if SVS ever starts becoming a worse value or other competitors start becoming better than them, that's where we're going to go. It's not that we're just in the pocket of SVS. It's like whoever is making really good products at really good values, that's what we're going to talk about. And that can change. It has changed over time.
Believe me, I don't think RBH even knows this podcast exists, and we talk about them all the time. So, we are not in any pockets. No, he does have some questions, though. I almost want to go to the second one first because it's funny, but
Sure.
we'll go with the first one. We'd like us to discuss how to decide which aspect ratio to choose for a projection screen. 16 by 9, yay, done. Now, oh wait, Rob has something to say.
Well, I mean,
We talked about this last week, though, so we don't need to
did,
go
yeah.
into the.
Yeah, no, I mean,
depth.
the basic question is, do you watch a lot of movies that are in the wider CinemaScope 2.35 to 1 aspect ratio? Do you want them to be physically larger than your standard 16 by 9 HD TV content? If that's really important to you, then you're going to need a screen that is larger than the screen you would use for 16 by 9. Now, do you only make it wider, or are you like me and you also like IMAX content, and so you want a gigantic screen that is both taller and wider than regular HD TV content? In which case, I like having two screens. I've mentioned that before. I like having a smaller 16 by 9 screen for HD TV content, and then a bigger 16 by 9 screen so that it can be both wider for 2.35 to 1 content and wider and taller for IMAX content. I like that solution. So I'm in agreement with Tom, actually. 16 by 9. Just two of them. That's all. Two different sizes.
You are insane. All right, and when I say that, it means something. All right, so he says 16 by 9 times 2. and
Yep.
apparently the money tree is in full bloom in Canada where he lives. His second question, which is ironic, is how can he improve upon the blend between his subwoofers and speakers? And here we come back to subwoofer questions that you say that we talk too much about, and then you immediately ask us a subwoofer question, which I find to be hilarious. Okay, so you should buy SBS subwoofers. I mean, wait a second.
Uh,
Okay, sorry. All right, how can he improve upon the blend between his speakers and subwoofers, particularly in a case where he's run Odyssey, but then measured or simply heard a dip or hump in the frequency range where the subwoofers are transitioning to the speakers? That seems weird. It also seems like he's got some setting wrong, to be honest with you. That seems like
I
he's
mean, if all you did was run an auto setup, that can certainly be the case because so often the auto setups, and this is not Odyssey's fault, this is on the manufacturers, they decide where the crossover goes, and so often, if you have tower speakers, they'll set them to 40 hertz or full band when really they should be crossing over
Yeah,
higher.
yeah.
Somewhere 60 or 80. So that part is easy. But honestly, the answer here is first of all, you need to get your subwoofers in order. And we're talking about subwoofers, but that's the real answer. You need to get your subwoofers in order first because the whole idea is if you can get your subwoofers set up, positioned, and set up, and we're talking about at least two of them here, but if you can do that so that they produce nice uniform bass that you can easily fix with just a few bands of EQ, which your auto setup will handle just fine on that front. If you can get them sounding nice and even and uniform and smooth, that means you then have the freedom to cross them over to your speakers wherever your speakers need to be crossed over. Where you really run into problems is when you're using only one subwoofer and you're using multiple seating locations, or you have two subwoofers but they're not already set up and positioned and calibrated optimally, and you have unevenness in your bass. Because then wherever you're crossing your speakers over, now your subwoofers are taking over, but the subwoofers themselves are uneven. So you have to start with getting the bass sorted, and then, I mean, if what you're finding is, all right, my bass is sorted, but I did the auto cal, or I just set everything to 80, and sometimes just setting everything to 80 does still result in a little hump or a dip right around 80 hertz, because 80 hertz corresponds quite nicely, unfortunately, to standard 8-foot ceiling height, and sometimes you get some weird things happening in the vertical range. So that's where I come back to my solution of unfortunately going one speaker at a time, playing bass sweeps, like set the speaker to full range, play a bass sweep through one speaker at a time. That often means physically disconnecting all the other speakers so that you can set your receiver to say, output the signal to all my speakers. That might be all channels stereo or party mode or whatever they call it. And then physically disconnect all but one speaker, play the sweep, and figure out how low can the speaker play before it starts to go wonky in the bass. And you might discover that it starts to go wonky. It can go all the way down to 60 hertz and it doesn't go wonky before that. Or you might discover, right up around 90 or 100 hertz. That's where things start to sound wonky out of that particular speaker. In which case, if you've already sorted your bass, you can set the crossover above wherever the sound starts to go wonky in the speaker.
I think that most of the time when we run into this problem, though, it is far simpler than what you're saying. Yes, okay, so you've placed your subwoofers, you've maybe to use the SPL meter to get them to the close to 75 hertz, and then you run Odyssey, and then people just walk away.
Right.
I think that's most of the time what's going on. What's mostly happening is people run that Odyssey and go, okay, it's fine, and they don't think about it anymore. And that's just, unfortunately, Odyssey's great, and these room calibration systems are very good, but they're not perfect. And a lot of times if you have problems in your rooms, or if your speakers, I've seen them set where clearly bookshelf speakers that are clearly barely getting down to 80 hertz, I've seen them set to large before. And you run the auto setup again, and it sets them to small and crosses them over at 90 or 100 or something like that. Not as, there could be all sorts of reasons. A car drives by, something happens, and it makes a difference. Or where the mic is set, or one reflection, or there's a fan on in the room, or the door was open a little bit or something. All these things can make a difference. So you have to go back and check your settings and double check, and then maybe run it again, just to be sure. These are I think it's most of the time that. Now, If after doing all that you find that there's still a dip or a hump right where that frequency range where the subwoofers are transitioning to the speakers, I would agree with Rob. I think the first thing is probably that your subs are just too hot to begin with, but there may very well be that that's where your room problems are, and you're just going to have to figure that out. Now you may just go through it and do what Rob says, which is basically go through each speaker, play a sweep through each speaker, and see where each speaker is having its issues, or you might just bump your global crossover up to 90 hertz or 100 hertz and see if that takes care of it. If that takes care of it, then that's what the problem is. And it's not that your subwoofers are too hot or that something else is weird. You know that 80 hertz range is the issue. And if you want to go through and check all these things, as Rob's saying, you can. Or you can just set it to 90 hertz and go on with your life. So, you decide how much your time is worth. Matthew is currently running a 2-channel setup in a 14-foot by 23-foot theater area in his basement, but that portion of the room is completely open to another 15-foot by 29-foot space. Sounds like what you have. It's a 29-foot by 52-foot theater that apparently you haven't utilized all of, but okay.
That would be a tremendously large theater. But
that's where we're going to start getting away from the SPS subs and into the Rythmiks. Okay, so we started recommending stuff. Anyways, so he's got a 14 by 23-foot theater in a much bigger space. In total, his room is a little over 6,000 cubic feet in volume, which makes it, I don't know, somewhere around ginormous.
Over extreme in the Audioholics
it's way big. Right now, he's got a Yamaha RX V1000 powering Klipsch RF3 tower speakers with a 100-inch projection screen and a Panasonic PT AX200 projector. He wants to rebuild his entire theater system over time. He wants to end up with at least 5.1 surround sound, possibly 2 subwoofers, not possibly. Exactly, 2 subwoofers, and wants to start with the AV receiver since his current RX V1000 lacks HDMI. That's a good choice. So I'll have more questions in the coming weeks, but for now, he wants to know if he should get the Denon AVR X4000 or if he can get away with a little less expensive X2000 or AVR X3000. He's concerned about the size of his room and whether these AV receivers will have enough power. He also isn't sure that Odyssey Multi-Q XT32 with sub EQ HT will be worth it. Now, you have Klipsch speakers. Let's just start there. You have Klipsch speakers. You can power them to ear bleed levels with a clock radio. This is not an issue. There is no amount of power that is too little for Klipsch speakers. No, honestly, really, you need like the watts in the one-handed range in order to get those things nice and loud. They are very efficient speakers. I haven't actually looked at the RF3s. I'm sure they're horn loaded, right? Are they the reference?
Oh yes, yeah. They're full-size towers there with the horn loaded tweeters.
What I thought.
Yeah, I mean, one interesting thing here is that we talk so much about room size. The total volume of air, not just whatever area you've designated. That really is only in application for the bass, because the bass is radiating omnidirectionally out of whatever is producing it, and the bass doesn't know that you're only sitting in this area. It's just like, hey, I'm going everywhere I can go. And so if you want to have nice high sound pressure levels in the bass, then you have to consider the entire room size. That is not so true in the mid-range and treble frequencies. Those are directional. Those you can aim at wherever you are. And so we're much more concerned with the direct sound when it comes to the mid-range and the treble frequencies. Therefore, worrying about the power, does one of these less expensive AV receivers have enough power just to play loud enough to fill that room? Yes, it does. You're not in worries there. If you were trying to do full range speakers and you were trying to fill that whole volume with bass coming just from 2 speakers, then I would start to worry about your AV receiver's power. But you've said you're going with subwoofers. That is a good choice.
Yes, it is. The rest of cubic feet.
That's right.
Yes, it is. Now, the real question that it really comes down to here is whether or not Odyssey Multi-Q XT32 with the sub EQ HT will be worth it. That is not a question I can answer for you.
Yeah.
Because any of these receivers will be fine. They will power your speakers. They will route bass to your subs. I think that 2000 and the 3000 both have Multi-Q XT.
They do.
Which is perfectly reasonable, perfectly acceptable. It is not as good as the XC32 with the sub EQ HT. It's not as good. That it doesn't do the sub frequencies. Uh, you're not going to be able to do any room correction down there. Uh,
Oh, it
is
does. Yeah, you can. It does room correction. It just doesn't do it independently between two different
Yeah,
subwoofers.
so I mean, it's just it's not going to be as powerful. Is that going to be? I can't tell you in your room based on what you've told us, or even if you told us if you gave us a perfect layout and everything else, told us everything was going to be in there. I don't think anybody could tell you for sure that you will absolutely need it. I mean, how much room treatments are you going to put in here? What what's all the furniture? Or, how loud do you want it to be? That sort of thing. That for me, it was worth it.
Hmm.
That multi-Q XT32, that's what I wanted. There was no doubt in my mind that's what I wanted. That was the one limiting factor. I didn't worry about how much power. I didn't worry about how many zones. I didn't worry about how many HDMI inputs or outputs. I didn't care about HDMI 2.0 stupid or HTTP, pissing me off. I didn't care about any of that. All I cared about was whether or not multi-Q XT32. That's what I wanted. Okay, but that's then maybe not the case for you. Is it
Yeah.
more important for you to save some money for those dual subs that you absolutely have to have because you do have to have them for this amount of room? Well, then save the money and get the 2,000 or the 3,000. Look at the rest of the things that are important to you. Zones, number of channels, dual independent subwoofer outputs, HDMI outputs, maybe MHL, the mobile high definition link.
Hmm.
Is that important to you? There's a lot of other things that go on there. Legacy connections. What are you connecting to this thing? Are you going to need component video? Are you going to need a composite video? There's a lot of things to consider here that aren't whether or not it has room correction and whether or not it can power these speakers.
You're just dying to say make a spreadsheet, aren't you?
You need a spreadsheet, sir. That's what you need.
Yes. I mean, the other thing is going from the receiver he has to one of these. If he gets, the AVR X2000 and that has multi-Q XT, and he never hears multi-Q XT32, he'll never know what he's missing.
That's true.
So that's
It's
you'll
all a
never
step
feel
up
like
from here,
anything is
sir.
missing. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, I will say you can get away with an X2000 or an X3000. It is not mandatory in any sense that you get the X4000. Would it be nice to have? I'll say yes, it would, especially since we are going to recommend you go with dual subs. But yeah, you can get away with one of the other
Yeah,
ones.
you better just wrap your head around the fact that you need two subwoofers and just own that because you have 6,000 cubic
Yeah,
feet.
and I
In,
also want to say he did include a diagram. His portion of the room is pushed over to one side, so I will say you want to absorb the heck out of your right wall. In his case, it's his right side wall because the entire left side is open to this huge other portion of his basement. So that right wall, you need to damp the heck out of that to try and knock down the reflections off that right wall, so they're a little bit more
it's not
equal
a
to what's coming
rectangular
off the
room
left wall.
space, is it? It's not
It's not perfect.
rectangular.
It's like a squat L shape
Yeah.
because the leg of the L, the vertical part of the L and the horizontal part of the L are both fat. So
That's some of the things we never really dealt with is, a lot of the times we talk about these, opposing walls and all that stuff, but when you have a
hmm
non-rectangular
hmm
room,
yeah, I'm actually gonna say, looking towards the future with these dual subs, you might discover that what you actually want to do is like down where the crook of the L would come in, so the very left portion of your theater area, that 14-foot wide part that you're going, that might be where you want to put one sub and then the other sub directly across the room from it, so that they're actually in the middle of the space, not the middle of your theater area, right? So we're
right?
always talking about putting them in the middle of opposing walls, but in your case, you have to consider the entire space,
Yeah.
not just your area. So that might work out just fine because they won't be blocking walkways there either.
Yeah, so let's see. Are we posting his picture online? I
I
don't
do
know.
not know.
Some people don't want us to post their pictures online, so
Yeah.
we'll just have to see. Anyways, it's the L-shaped thing. All right, on to more subwoofer questions. David has a 3,000 cubic foot room. He's thought he had a big room until he heard the last question. Above his garage with a strictly two-channel music setup, he has an opportunity to buy a used pair of Rythmik LV12R subs for about $900. They retail for like $600 a piece.
I think they're close. Well, once you include shipping, they're definitely closer to 650 or 700 each. If
Okay,
you're
I think
getting
it was
them brand new.
$599 is what I saw on the website, so it must be with
Or
shipping.
at
Yeah.
least that, yeah.
Since this used pair will cost the same as a new pair of SVS PB1000, he wants to know how the LV12Rs and the PB1000 compare. David wants to know how the Rythmik direct servo stacks up against SVS's DSP control. He also wants to know how Rythmik's warranty and service will compare to SVS Bill of Rights. Finally, since this is a two-channel only system and he really only cares about his one primary seat, should he even be concerned about getting two subwoofers? Because there's a lot of questions here. These are very similar sized subs. They use 12-inch drivers. Both of them are using 12-inch drivers, right? The PB1000.
No, the PB1000 is a 10-inch driver. It's a smaller driver. Yeah.
Yeah. They're both rated to 19 hertz, if I remember correctly.
And they're both 300-watt amplifiers.
Yeah.
Similar box sizes, all that.
Got like 4 different stupid windows open here. Hold on. Let me go back. Here's the Rythmik. So the Rythmik is 16 inches wide by 22 inches high by 19 inches deep. Actually, it's 20.5 inches deep with the grill and the amplifier knobs. The SVSs are not coming up on my screen. There it is. Are 18 inches high by 15 inches wide. No, I'm sorry. 15 inches wide by 19 inches high by 20 inches deep, and that includes the feet, the grill, and the amplifier. So they're similar sizes. Basically, the Rythmiks are a bit bigger, and they're like a couple inches taller.
Yeah, and a larger diameter driver. Yeah.
And a larger diameter driver. So, I mean, basically, it looks like what you're going to be getting, just kind of a quick glance, you're going to be getting more output out of the Rythmik drivers. It doesn't really the Rythmik subs. It doesn't really sound like he needs it. It's a big room, but it's not a huge room, and either of these subs would be just fine, especially in dual configuration. In my opinion, you'd be fine with either one of those. Now, if you think that at some point in the future you might want to stick these subs into a bigger room, both will probably be fine. But you could certainly increase the size of your room. I think even more if you use the Rythmiks over the SVSs, which will I think hit their limit before that.
Yeah, so I mean that gets into his second part of his question about the direct servo versus the DSP, because there's a little bit of a difference in design philosophy between how Rythmik comes at protecting their subwoofers and how SVS comes at protecting their subwoofers. So the whole point of the direct servo, because I mean most things that have a servo control, it's actually a accelerometer that's attached to the driver, so it's sensing the velocity of the driver, and if it says, all right, you shouldn't be moving as much as you're moving, I'm going to tamp down the signal a little bit to protect you and stop you from distorting. In Rythmik's case, it's physically a wire that's connected there, so it's a direct feedback. That's why they call it a direct servo. But it's a feedback loop. That's what it is, and it's basically saying, all right, if the feedback signal ever goes above this point, then tamp down the signal so that the driver's protected and doesn't distort. But the whole way they're going at it is whatever frequency is playing, let it play as loud as that frequency can play out of this driver and out of this configuration. SVS, on the other hand, says, let's try and make the output as linear as possible across all the frequencies. So they're, in fact, limiting themselves, because when you're starting to play really low frequencies, of course, it's a little bit quieter. And they give themselves about a 6 decibel, wiggle room over at SVS. But the SVS subs could actually play even louder than they do in the, say, 50 to 60 hertz area. They could play even louder, but they don't, because they use that digital signal processing to keep it all quite linear. Rythmik, on the other hand, says, you go as loud as you can go. So, in that 40 to 60 hertz area, they can actually play louder in there. Will you ever make use of that? Probably not. It's highly unlikely in that room size you're ever going to come up against that limit. So in terms of how different will they sound from one another, not very much at all.
No, they shouldn't. Now, I don't know anything about Rythmik's warranty and service compared to SVS's Bill of Rights. Do you? Because
I don't have the first-hand experience with that. I mean, by all anecdotal accounts I can find of them, everyone is very happy with Rythmik service. They definitely care about making sure that their customers are happy, and
we know that SVS is good, so
we know that they do as well. Yeah. So I mean, I don't have any real worries about Rythmik on that end.
The difference you're going to find here, though, is that you're buying used Rythmiks versus brand new SVSs. So, that warranty and service with Rythmik is going to be different. I don't know how well that they support resold subs versus SVS. Obviously, SVS is going to give you 100% of their warranty because you're buying it new from them. that being said, the sub works. You're probably fine. You know what I mean? Listen to it. If it doesn't go because something is torn, then you're gonna be fine. These things are not gonna be played anywhere near their limits, so it should be okay.
Yeah, I mean, just going strictly by design, I do not know this for 100% sure, but I'm going by the information that I could find. It appears as though that 12-inch driver that's in the Rythmik in this case is a lower mass driver than the one in the SVS. Now, it's an interesting thing when you start to have lower mass in subwoofer drivers because force is mass times acceleration. So having higher mass gives you more force, and that's why sometimes subwoofer drivers are really, really heavy, and then you need a massive magnet and a massive amplifier to keep them under control. But it is, in a way, a more efficient way of creating more force by having a heavier driver. So there's this whole interplay between self-damping of the driver. A physically lighter or physically less massive driver will have better self-damping. It is easier to make it stop or easier to make it start. It has lower inertia, but then it has less force because it has less mass. So there's a little bit of a trade-off there, just in the way it's been designed. But again, audibly, it's just it's not going to make a big difference.
I don't know that you're gonna hear much of a difference between the two, honestly. But so. That's answering all the questions about which one over the other. We basically said, go with which one feels good. The SBS are going to be slightly smaller. They're going to have they'll be brand new with the new warranty. The Rythmiks, I think, if you're going to plan on moving these things to a bigger room, you very well maybe get a little bit more output out of these guys. The design choices are a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I put the LV12R really close to like the Outlaw LFM1 Plus, because both of those, very similar price points, 550, 600-ish type price points, very similar sizes and all that. Higher output, just overall, if you just played, blasted pink noise, higher output than the PB1000. That's where they have that slight advantage. So in larger rooms, I tend to favor the Outlaw LFM1 Plus or the Rythmik LV12R over the PB1000, but this case, it doesn't really apply.
Doesn't really apply, right? So it's going to be 6 of one, half dozen of another as far as how they sound in your room. Yeah. But your last question is, since this is a 2-channel only system, and you really only care about your one primary seat, should you even be concerned about getting 2 subwoofers? You don't have to be. You can certainly save some money. I would be. The bass it'll be easier because only being worried about one seat is one thing. Being able to place a subwoofer in the exact spot that makes that one seat sound as good as it can is a completely different thing. Is the rest of your room dedicated solely to it's got 2 speakers, a seat, and everything else is open for subwoofer placement? If that's the case, well then buy one subwoofer and do the subwoofer crawl, and then you'll be pretty good. In this case, you can get 2 subwoofers and then place them wherever you want. You place them in the opposing corners or the opposing walls, and you'll have much more even frequency response over multiple areas. And then you can move your chair if you want to, or your head, or lie down on your couch.
I'll just say from my own personal experience, it's like I think we've all had that. Like we talk about bass being, sort of non-directional as long as it's below about 80 hertz and, omnidirectional dispersion coming out of the subwoofer. But I think we've all still had that experience where, because it is a crossover, because it isn't a hard brick wall at 80 hertz, we've had those occasions where you can kind of tell that the subwoofer is over that away. Some sounds that are coming out of a lone subwoofer, you can sort of go, it's, towards that side of the room as opposed to just coming from mutually everywhere. So if you're super picky about it, I mean, if it's affordable, I still favor 2 subwoofers always because you're going to be moving yourself. You're not putting your head in a vice, so I still favor 2 if you can do it.
Yeah, I do too. Obviously, we've talked about that over and over again, but technically, if you can place it anywhere, then fine. Yeah. You could probably get away with just the 1.
Yeah.
I think that you'll be happier with 2.
Me too.
I think so. All right. On to more 2 subwoofers and 2-channel setups. Frank has a 24-foot by 20-foot by 8-foot living room. He's using his Macintosh C33 preamp oh my God, which is older than Christ. It is so old. I looked at this thing. It is nothing but knobs. Everywhere knobs. It is so sexy. I was like, oh, that is so sexy. It is sexy. Anyways, Macintosh C33 preamp with a Macintosh 2255 amplifier driving one pair of Macintosh SL6 speakers. I didn't look those up. Are those a line arrays?
They are, well, kind of. They're like a triple tweeter. They're a triple tweeter in a line thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And a pair of Klipsch G28 speakers set up flanking the couch. So those are his rear speakers?
Well, he's not using them as rears because he can only do 2 channels at a time. So I'm thinking those are maybe for like guest mode, party mode, just music in the background.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
Something like that. Yeah.
All right, anyways. The C33 preamp, let's pretend that he doesn't have those Klipsch speakers. Let's just go with the Macintosh because the Klipsch speaker is ruining the effect for me. The C33 preamp sucks eye. I bet if you've ever been in the basked in the blue glow of Macintosh amplifiers, those potentiometers that are
potentiometers, yeah.
whatever they are sucks high. The C33 preamp does not have any bass management of subwoofer outputs. Back then, whenever these things were put out, it doesn't look like they.
Oh, you mean the VU meters, don't you? The little needle.
Yeah, the needle things.
VU meter, yeah.
Yeah, but it does have 3 pairs of outputs, and he's only using 2 of those pairs. So could he connect a pair of subwoofers to the third set of outputs and just use the internal low-pass filter of the subwoofers themselves, or does he need some other type of connection? Okay. I immediately started thinking about this, and Rob and I came to the same conclusion all at the same time. But basically, the first thought I had was, yes, you can do that. Okay? You can
Sound
do
will
that.
come out.
Sound will come out. Sound will come out of your subwoofer. It will be bass, and you will use a crossover in your subwoofer to say, okay, I don't want anything above 80 hertz or whatever you set it at. Of course, it won't be a brick wall filter. It'll roll off. We've talked about that over and over again. It will, but you are still sending a full range signal to all 4 of your speakers or 2 of your speakers or however you're doing this. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so that by sending a full range signal to all your speakers, those speakers are now trying to play that bass as well. The idea of having the subwoofers is to take the bass away from those speakers so that you get the thing that can do the bass the best, which is the subwoofers, can do it and break it out into the places where it needs to be so that you can get evener response, those opposing corners, or the opposing walls, or whatever it is. Okay, so what you need is to take the crossover and put it between the speaker and the subwoofers. Okay, that's what you don't have. You don't have any bass management in your C33 preamp. It doesn't exist. You need to put that crossover there so that you can kick out all this. There's a lizard in my house. It's crawling over there. Gonna laugh because I'll find it later all desiccated and dead because it'll starve to death. I don't have any bugs. They just get in because we have lots of bugs there.
Now you're up to lizards, yeah.
Yep. You just got loud, dude.
I'm sorry?
Your speakers, your headphones your mic just got loud. I don't know why you're much louder. I think your volume changed. Anyways, so you need to put your crossover between your preamp and your amp. Okay? That way your speakers are only getting the stuff above the crossover point, and the subwoofers are getting all the stuff below. Okay? In order to do that, you need to have another box. And I know you don't want to add another box to your thing, but you're going to need another box. And the box we're going to both suggest is the mini DSP.
Yep. Yeah, the mini DSP. I mean, in the olden days, there were other crossovers that you might have purchased, but these days, mini DSP just makes so much more sense, and
Well,
even more sense
too.
coming up. Yeah, with what's coming up later. Now, this is a little bit tricky because he has 2 different speakers, 2 different sets, 2 different pairs of speakers. So I was thinking, first of all, maybe getting one of their mini DSPs like 8 in, 8 out units, but that makes the price go way up to like $600. It's actually cheaper to just get 2 of their 2 in, 4 out units because you do need 4 outputs because he's considering dual subwoofers. So what you're doing here is you're taking the output coming out of your C33 preamp. So, of course, there's a left and a right. That's your 2 inputs. That's going to feed a mini DSP. The mini DSP then handles all your crossover, and you can even do EQ and stuff like that and phase differences, which we might be getting into in the next part of his question. So then you need 2 outputs to feed the 2 subwoofers and another 2 outputs to feed the amplifiers for the 2 speakers. So you need 2 in, 4 out.
I think that's probably all he's going to need because I bet what he's doing is he's splitting the output from to the
Well,
speakers into two different channels of his amp so that he can power his clip speakers.
no, because he has two of the 2255 amps, so he
Oh, he
has
does have
four
two?
channels. Yeah, he has four channels of amplification. The C33 does have three stereo outputs, so he's got one pair for the Macintosh speakers and another pair for the Klipsch speakers. So yeah, if you want to have bass management on all four of your speakers, then I would suggest getting two of
Yeah.
the in, four out mini DSP units, and then you can have bass management. And the subwoofers will have two. Most subwoofers have a left and a right input, so you can just use one for each set of speakers. That will work totally fine.
Yeah. All right. And now I'm looking at pictures of his amps, and his amps are sexy too, because they're God, they're sexy. God, dude, I want his gear. Oh, look at the, look at that thing. I bet you can't even pick it up. I bet it's like 3 billion pounds. Anyways, okay. His second question and last is, due to placement constraints, the only possible places where he could put two subwoofers both behind his couch and only 18 inches by 18 inches in size. So, all right. So basically, you're co-locating them, or I'm gonna guess that you can put them on either side of the
Yeah, it
back of
sort
your.
of sounds like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And only 18 inches by 18 inches inside. So what we recommend in terms of how to deal with that placement and what subwoofers could you use that will physically fit. Well, there's a number of subwoofers that you can use that will physically fit. In fact, the ones that we were just talking about, they were 16 by 18, right? Wasn't there
Well,
by
some of them are
19?
20 inches deep, so that isn't going to
But
work.
no, because turn to the side. 18 by 18.
Well, 18 by 18, so 15 by
Oh,
20
okay.
isn't going to fit into 18 by
Yeah,
18.
yeah, yeah. What were the ones that we were looking at?
Cylinders.
Yeah, the
Cylinders.
cylinders will work for sure, and you can lie them down and all that stuff.
Well, you wouldn't
Seems
want to
like,
lie them down and if all you have is 18 by 18 of floor space, but
yeah,
a
that's
16.5-inch diameter circle will fit within an 18 by 18-inch square.
almost get that the SVS in there. It's 18.4 by 15
Yes, but if you
by
go
18.4
to
deep. Actually, yeah, yeah, 18.4. Very
if you go
close.
to sealed subwoofers, then you can definitely fit in here. Rythmik has their F12, SVS has their SB2000.
Did
Both
you
of
tell
those
us
are
how big this
basically
room
like,
is? Yeah, 24
um,
by 20.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's pretty
you'd
big.
be okay. You'd be okay. Like an SB2000 will be okay in that. This is music only,
See,
so
the fact that he says living room makes me think that it's open to other parts of the house too.
could be. Yeah.
Which means that you're going to want something. Yeah, you're probably going to
Cylinders.
Cylinders seem like your best bet because they have a lot of output. They have a small footprint,
Hmm.
and they're going to look really weird behind your couch. But whatever on the other
Not
side, like
really.
what's with these water heaters right here?
You can do
Uh,
that thing where whatever wall color your room is, you camouflage them. We had that before. You,
we've
you
seen
put some
that. Now,
you put some colored paper around them.
yeah. So placement is an issue. Are you
Mm.
sure? Are you absolutely positive these are the only two places in your whole house? Because I'm not going to say it's not worth getting two subs, but it's going to be awfully, awfully difficult to get them to sound as good as they could if you could just place them better.
Yeah,
Uh,
this is effectively the same as subs, but putting them both at the front of the room, right? Just
yeah,
putting them both at the back of the room in this
and we
case.
always say don't put them both at the front of the room because it's hard to calibrate them.
Hmm.
And the only way to really do this is, and we've talked about it before, is playing with phase. And playing with
Hmm.
phase is a nightmare because there is no rule to it. There's no law that I know of that says, oh, well, if it's right here, just turn the phase to 45.7 degrees and then it'll sound perfect. It's just literally the calibrators are like they'll sit there and they'll adjust the phase knob and then they'll do the sweep stuff and take some measurements and move the phase knob again and over and over and over and over and over again until it sounds the way they want it to sound. It's just a trial and error thing, and even then, it's still maybe won't sound as good as if you had just put them where they should be. So, yeah,
Yeah, this is tough because
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
there's also the very real possibility that if he gets one subwoofer and he only has these two
Two
places where he can
places, yeah.
possibly put them, that neither of those places will be a good place. That is hopefully not the case, but is entirely possible.
You know, Frank,
Um,
this is what I'm going to suggest. I'm going to suggest that you borrow a subwoofer. Okay.
right?
Honestly, I honestly suggest that you find someone, a friend, or make a friend, or put ads on Craigslist and try not to get murdered. Uh, who borrow a subwoofer and put it in one of those two places, and just, I mean, even if you have to move the couch out of the way so you can get it back there or whatever, just for
Hmm.
the purposes of this test, put it back there and see what it sounds like. Now, you could order from SVS, you could order
That's right.
one or two or both, and just say, I don't really sound that good back there,
I
and
just
send it
go
over.
ahead and order two and then send back one or none.
Yeah, but if you don't want to go through that hassle, find if you've got a friend with a subwoofer, ask them to bring it over. Uh, and just see how it sounds in one of those two places and do the subwoofer crawl. Put
Hmm.
the subwoofer on your seat, go back there and sit behind your couch like some sort of weirdo, and listen to the bass sweep as it goes through and go, oh God, it sounds awful. Or, oh, it actually sounds pretty even. Well, then maybe you can get away with the one.
Yeah.
But this is the thing. Honestly, Frank, I'm being honest with you. If you order two subs, you're gonna have a really hard time sending one back. So, if you get behind your couch with just one sub playing on your chair, and you go, that sounds pretty even, you will never know what two would have sounded like, and then you
Right.
can be happy because you'll buy the one and you'll think it sounds pretty good, and you can go on with your life. But if you end up getting the two subs, you're
Yeah.
gonna probably end up keeping them.
But since we are recommending getting the mini DSPs to handle the crossover duties, if you have time and you're willing to do it, you could do the crazy trial and error of just slowly adjusting the phase. Usually, I would recommend get one subwoofer sounding as good as it can, wherever it happens to be, and then leave that one alone, and then only adjust the second one, and just keep adjusting its phase until you get as even and uniform distribution of the bass as you can. If you have the time to do it, it can be done. So
Yeah, and now
there's
mini
that.
DSP you can buy them with like the microphones too.
That's right.
So more spending more money. But then again, you've got Macintosh gear, dude. You must have cash.
Well, he hasn't upgraded it in a while, so
I know,
it
dude.
might have been a
Why
one-time
would
expenditure.
you? I mean, look at that stuff. If I had two-channel gear that looked like that, I wouldn't upgrade it either. Mike, how are we doing on time? Ooh,
We got about 10 minutes left, so if we can hit Mike and Jared, then we'll have once again three questions left over.
okay. All right, Mike. This is okay. Remember the Logitech Z5500 speakers we were talking about last week? Mike's got
Mm-hmm.
them too. Not the
Mm-hmm.
same guy, different guy. It was Ashley
That was
last time.
Ashley last week, yeah.
This time it's Mike. He's using the Z55 speakers near field. He has them connected to a different amp, not the subwoofer amplifier that it came with. He found that the setting the crossover to 150 hertz gave him more bass than when he set the crossover to 80 hertz. That seems counterintuitive. He's just wondering why that's the case. Because they're tiny little computer speakers, dude. You're lucky they got down to 150. That's why. So when you set it to 80, what we tell you to set it at, we assume you have real speakers. And not that these aren't real speakers, but they're not. So they kind of start rolling off someplace in the 100 hertz range, maybe. You know,
I'm thinking more like 250 is
uh,
where they start.
yeah. I was being generous, all right? So they
Mm-hmm.
start rolling off someplace. So when you set the crossover to 80, the subwoofer stops playing at 80, and your speakers start playing at God 250, 150, 100, someplace in there. I mean, they start rolling off way before that 80. So, yes, you just told the subwoofer not to play where there should be stuff
Or at
played.
least to get quieter and quieter as it goes above 80.
This is the part where you turn off the subwoofer, you set your speakers to full range or whatever, and you
Well,
play a
yeah,
bait.
I wouldn't.
No,
I wouldn't set it to full range because they'd have no protection inside those little guys. So
Yeah, well, that's true, but you're going to have to do it softly. But you're going to listen to a sweep and see where they start rolling off.
yeah.
And when they start rolling off, that's where you want to set your crossover. We talked about that before. Number two? How does near field speaker positioning affect the listening experience? He knows it will result in more direct sound versus reflected sound, but does that actually change the listening experience? I don't see. No, I mean, I guess some people think so. I have been like at CD and stuff like that where you do like some real near field stuff because they want you to hear their speakers, and with all
Hmm.
the stuff around you, it helps block that out. You're almost in a wall of
Yeah.
sound. But for me, I've never really thought, oh, these near field speakers sound different than uh, my home theater speakers. Like they all farther away, the home theater speakers sound more spacious. Well, they can. There's more reflected energy that's coming at you, so they get more sound like that. But uh, I don't think that it's a huge difference for me.
Well, I mean, he hit the major thing already, which is that you are hearing more direct sound
Yeah,
versus reflected sound. When the speakers are farther away from you, you are hearing more of the reflections of the room. So that does alter the listening experience, just like putting headphones obviously doesn't sound the same as listening to speakers, because there again, you've completely eliminated the room when you put a pair of headphones on. So it does alter it, but you already understand the reason why. The other difference is, of course, near field, you have one very small sweet spot. You can't
yeah,
really have anyone sitting next to you getting the same experience. But yeah, I mean, if that's the setup you have, it's not as though you can't have good sound. In fact, like we mentioned earlier on, pretty much every mixing station, most recording studios, they start with near field speakers because they want to hear the direct sound, not the reflected sound when they're
yeah,
making all their adjustments. So you're fine.
yeah.
You already know why it sounds different.
Yeah. So third and last, do we have any suggestions for speakers that will work especially where well in near field setup? Well, there's a ton of studio monitors that are built for these purposes, so you can almost choose any of them. I've heard and tested and like the Rocket ones. They're yellow drivers, Kevlar drivers. They're slot ported. I think I got the Rocket 6s. I don't think I
Mhm.
got the 8s. Maybe I had the 8s. I don't know. I have to go check. I lent them to a friend and he won't give them back. So those are very good. I've heard the Kef ones that are I think they're sealed. Uh, they call them maybe the Kef ones. Is that what they're called? I don't remember what they're called. But
I'm not sure.
those sound really amazing. So look for the Kef for the studio monitors that they sell. Those are pricey though. I think they're like a grand a speaker
Right.
or something. They're like really
Yeah.
pricey.
So yeah, I
The
mean, he
Rocket
was
ones
saying
are
he
much
wants to.
cheaper.
Yeah, he wants to keep this in the lower, maybe mid sort of price range. He didn't give a dollar amount
What's a
in for
mid?
the
Mid
podcast.
to
I,
what? Mid-sized
well, I don't know.
car?
I would call that like $500 is probably mid, but he's probably
Well, the
looking to
Rocket
go
ones
under
will
that.
fit in there, and they also have subwoofers that you can buy that go with them. So, and
But
they're always on sale at Amazon.
the thing is that he mentioned that he's got whatever separate amplifier, AV receiver, or whatever it is that he's using, which means right now he's running his speakers as passive speakers, and a lot of studio monitors are active speakers. They have their own amplification built in. So if you want to keep the same arrangement that you have now and not just connect your sound card or whatever is happening directly to the speakers that are then powering themselves, then you do need to look for passive speakers.
Yeah,
Now, I mean, I would go to like those NHT Super Zeros.
those would
Those
be
work
perfect. Yeah,
fantastic as little near field monitors, $100 a pop, so that should fit within almost anyone's price range. The thing here is that a lot of speakers that say specifically they're designed for near field, those speakers often don't sound great when they're farther away because the only thing that the designers cared about was on-axis frequency response, and they have really wonky off-axis frequency response. That's sometimes the case with things that are specifically called near field. If speakers were designed to work well in the far field, regular speakers, they will also sound fine in the near field because they will still have flat on frequency, on
I seem
axis
to
frequency
remember
response.
asking Shane Rich of RVH this,
Hmm.
and I think his response, I have to go back and listen to that interview, was something along the lines of, I'm not listening when I'm designing my speakers. I'm not listening to home theater speakers near field.
Right.
So if you think of it from the designer standpoint, yes, they should sound fine near field if they were designed to be further away because they're worried about off-axis
Well,
response.
yeah, and measurements are always taken at 1 meter distance anyway,
Yeah,
whether it's near field or far field. Purpose. Whatever they envision the purpose of the speaker being, they still take all the measurements at 1 meter away.
yeah,
So there's not a huge difference there. But
there
yeah, it's
shouldn't be.
often the dispersion of the speakers. So, but since you're near field, you don't really have to worry. You are worried about on-axis frequency response. So yeah, I mean, I definitely look at those Super Zeros, Ascends speakers, like their CBM 170 bookshelf speakers. I mean, they're like closer to 350, 400 a pair. I'm not sure if that's within the price range, but they work really, really well as near field monitors and they're passive speakers. But then on the cheap range, there's also like the like Behringer. They have their studio monitors that are cheap as all get out, and they have passive versions of them. And if
I
you are
wonder,
willing to go to,
does M Audio, is it M Audio that makes those little,
yeah, they tend to be a little bit higher priced.
yeah, I think they're 300, 400
But I was
bucks.
thinking also like those JBL 3 series. Now those are active. Those have amps built in, so you'd have to go with that. But like those JBL 3 series, one of our listeners sort of raved about how good they are. He made mention, make sure you get the smaller ones, the 5-inch ones. The 8-inch ones, apparently the cabinets are so thin on them that the cabinets actually resonate a bit once they get up to that larger 8-inch size. So he was not a fan of that at all. But the smaller size is compact enough that the cheap cabinet is still kind of rigid.
All right, we've got 2 minutes. Jared
Okay, we can.
is seeing the sale prices on the Denon AVR X4000. They're piquing his interest, but he wants to know if Odyssey Multi-Q XT with sub-EQ HT will be a vast improvement over regular Odyssey Multi-Q, which he has already. Vast, Jared?
Yeah.
I don't know that vast is the word I would probably. I mean, it's got more fur filters. It's got better resolution. It it can EQ 2 subs independently. It's got improvements. There's no doubt about it.
And if you're running 2 subs, I really do like the way sub EQ HD handles that. So
yeah,
there's that. You're not getting nothing. I think he's kind of looking for an excuse for us to say go get an
One of us. You want one, Jared, so just buy it. No, I honestly, dude, I can't tell you if it's going to be a vast improvement. I'm afraid that if you get it, you're going to go, I don't know, it still sounds pretty good. I don't think night and day stuff doesn't happen very often in audio. It does happen. You can hear the difference. Sure. The difference between having a sub and not having a sub, night and day.
Yep.
The difference between multi-channel versus stereo, night and day. It really is. Now, Joel or Jose or whoever, might say that the 2-channel imaging is so much better, whatever. I don't know. The fact that the music's coming from behind you is a night and day difference from when it's not. Okay, that's just all there is to it. This is not going to be night and day. This is going to be, it's making things evener. It's making things. Especially the bass is, the frequency response is going to be, flatter and more even across more seats. Is that something you're going to notice by sitting in the same seat you always sat in? I don't know, but you may notice it at some point, and then at that point you'll say ha, or you'll just say I really wanted to buy this, and I just needed Tom and Rob to say okay, and we say okay. But if you really don't want to spend the money, or you think your wife might divorce you, don't. You'll be fine with multi-Q.
Yeah. I can't say vast if that's the operative word. Nope, not vast. If you had $800 and you went from a system that had no subwoofer to a system that had an $800 subwoofer or a pair of $400 subwoofers, vast difference. But spending $800 and getting Multi-Q XT32 as
like I have wings. I look like an angel. I got wings.
All right. Fast.
Not fast. All right. So let's go back to how you can contact us. If you've listened this far and you're like, but they didn't answer my question. Well, if you already asked it, it's on the list. Especially if your name is Cameron, Bruno, or William, who is going to continue to get bumped for a while.
At least it wasn't a question, though. It wasn't a question.
Okay, the other 2 guys were actual questions. All right. We will get to you guys. If you have a question, you want to ask it, Tom at avrant.com, Rob at avrant.com. Twitter is at FirstReflect for Rob, at avrant_Tom for me. Facebook.com/avrant podcast, the podcast website, www.avrant.com. If you guys would like to hang out after this at one of our recordings, you can just show up around 11 p.m. and somehow follow me on Google Plus, and then that will be a thing that happens.
That's Eastern time, by the way.
Eastern time. Whatever. Are we on Eastern Standard again, or are we daylight?
It's back to standard, yep.
Yay.
All 4 months of it.
Yay. All right. For AV Rant, I'm Tom Mantry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
I'll start the podcast in a second. I hope this thing sounds